does feel like when we talk about these parametric triggers, and with the the number of deaths trigger, for example, that was utilized, that it is a bit of a blunt instrument. I mean, it does feel like maybe these triggers were created in a world that wasn't really as advanced as we are now, or thinking about parametric insurance in the way that so many insurtechs are. And there just seems to be so much innovation now about the way that we can link certain outcomes, certain instances, measurements to the activation of an insurance policy. I mean, I can think of some very interesting insurtechs who are doing this. For example, dealing with flood risk, and there's a company in the UK called Flood Flash, where
great folks. They're really innovative.
Exactly, and they've thought about this instant. Well, yes, normally the normal model would be indemnity, right? You've got to get a loss adjuster around to your house, measure, look at the cost of your floor, your carpets, your kitchen, your doors, all of that stuff. I mean, there's huge cost, huge time, huge disruption. Or, as they've done, install that piece of that smart sensor outside of the house. As soon as the water reaches a certain level, it triggers the payout, and the money can be with you within only a couple of days. And that's the type of solutions I can think of in this sort of post-COVID-19 world, where parametric solutions are going to come into the play. I mean, I personally could see things where maybe they're using, aerial satellite photography to work out the footfall in a certain city to know whether or not a cafe should have its parametric pandemic triggered, which may just not be only that. It could also be that the World Health Organization has to also announce a pandemic, so it could be multi-layered, but with triggers that are simple to understand, seem to have a direct correlation to what the customer would see as being relevant and reasonable. So, what are your thoughts on these triggers and the triggers that could be used?
Well, a possible again, I step back and look at initially the supply chain disruption, and with the advent of satellite communication on vehicles and such, and we work in a just-in-time supply environment across the globe. There's a predicted or a predictable model of how things get from factory A to a shipping point and then such. Aggregating those data, and if a trigger hits where the overall flow of material becomes outside of, say, 3 or 4 sigma standard deviation, it might trigger an economic parametric, because there's going to be a delay in Walmart putting the goods to the shelf, and it's going to affect sales. Now, this is just one tiny little piece, but it's a piece that has to be looked at. Maersk has great innovative ways of tracking their shipping across the ocean. Putting all these pieces together, putting AI to work to detecting in retrospect of what started in December in Hubei province and ends up in New York City with 10,000 people who are sick and all the businesses closed. There are pieces that fall into place there. And when you understand how the pieces fall, you can begin to determine what were the key factors that would trigger either economic or health or societal disruption. It's a huge project that's underway, but unless it starts, you can't identify the triggers. You have to go back to all the little pieces. It's easy to say in the US or UK, all these businesses closed, their revenues fell by 50%, and that's the trigger. That's the easy economic trigger. Or the trigger is the government says you have to close your business. And if that's the simple trigger, great. It's easy, it's authoritative, it's measurable. But do you take the big piece, or do you try to understand all the little pieces that go together to create that big piece? And when you can do that, now you can start to anticipate what should we do or have in place to mitigate those effects and try to make the trigger not happen.